The California sun bore down on Naval Amphibious Base Coronado with unforgiving intensity. September heat shimmered off the tarmac where Commander Meredith Kincaid stood, dress whites crisp despite the temperature, watching 8 men who would rather follow anyone but her. Team 7, the Navy's elite within the elite. Operators who'd bled in Fallujah, Kandahar, Mosul. Men who'd carried their previous commander, a legend named Reeves, off a Helmand Province battlefield 3 weeks ago, his legs shattered by an IED that should have killed them all. Now they had her instead. Meredith kept her face neutral as she approached the team room, a nondescript building that had witnessed more classified briefings than any congressman would sleep comfortably knowing about. Her reflection caught in the glass door for a moment. 38 years old, 5'7", 140 pounds of muscle earned through 15 years of proving she belonged in places where women weren't supposed to exist. The scar along her left forearm told one story. Ramadi, 2006, close quarters knife fight with an insurgent who'd learned too late that size meant nothing against skill and rage. The calluses on her hands told another. 10,000 hours on the range, 10,000 repetitions of weapon manipulation until the HK-416 felt like an extension of her nervous system. But scars and calluses didn't impress men like these, not until they saw what she could do. She pushed through the door, 8 pairs of eyes locked onto her. The team room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning struggling against the heat. Gear hung on the walls like relics in a cathedral. Load-bearing vests, helmets with night vision mounts, weapons cleaned to a mirror finish. The smell of gun oil and old coffee filled the air. Lieutenant Garrett Colvin sat at the head of the briefing table. 42 years old, Texas born and bred, with a jaw that looked carved from granite and eyes that had witnessed too much combat to fear anything mortal. 20 years in the teams, a reputation for brutal honesty that had derailed promotions, but earned absolute loyalty from men who'd followed him through hell. He didn't stand when she entered. Senior Chief Boone Rafferty leaned against the far wall, arms crossed over a chest that had absorbed shrapnel in 3 different countries. 45 years old from somewhere deep in Appalachia, where men learned to shoot before they learned to read. 200 confirmed kills as a sniper, a voice like gravel sliding down a mountain. He watched Meredith with the patient assessment of a hunter evaluating prey. The others arranged themselves around the room with the unconscious spacing of operators who'd worked together long enough to know each other's blind spots. Thaddeus Drummond, the EOD specialist whose hands could disarm a pressure plate IED in pitch darkness. Lawson Briggs, the MIT dropout, who controlled drones with the precision of a surgeon and wrote code like poetry. Cormac Sullivan, the medic who'd performed emergency surgery in the back of a moving Humvee under fire. Eli Strand and Rourke Hayes, breachers and communicators who moved through enemy compounds like smoke. Team 7, the best operators in naval special warfare, and every single one of them wondered what political game had put a woman in command. Meredith set her briefing folder on the table with deliberate care. The sound echoed in the silence. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice carried the flat, measured tone of someone who'd learned early that volume was weakness. "I'm Commander Meredith Kincaid. Effective immediately, I have command of Team 7. Questions?" Garrett Colvin leaned back in his chair. The metal creaked. He studied her for a long moment, and Meredith recognized the look. She'd seen it 100 times before. Men trying to reconcile what they expected with what they saw, trying to find the weakness that would confirm their suspicions. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am." The honorific dripped with something that wasn't quite respect. "Granted." Colvin stood, 6'2", shoulders that strained against his fatigues. He moved with the controlled aggression of a man who'd survived by being the most dangerous person in every room he entered. "This team lost Commander Reeves 3 weeks ago. Best tactical mind in naval special warfare. Led us through 18 combat deployments without losing a single operator." He paused, Let that sink in. With all respect, we need to know you're not a diversity hire. The other men shifted, some uncomfortable with the directness, others nodding slightly, grateful someone had said what they were all thinking. Meredith didn't blink, didn't let her jaw tighten or her shoulders tense. She'd learned in BUD/S that showing emotion was blood in the water. The instructors had tried to break her with words far harsher than anything Colvin could conjure. They'd failed. "Lieutenant Colvin," she said, her voice unchanged, "from 0800 to 1700 hours today, you will command this team. I will observe." She let that hang in the air. Plan a training evolution. Full CQB scenario. Live ammunition. You have total authority. I will sit outside the kill house and grade your performance. The room went absolutely still. "If you pass," Meredith continued, "we'll discuss leadership. If you fail, you will shut the hell up and follow orders. Dismissed." She turned and walked out without waiting for a response. Behind her, she heard Boone Rafferty's low drawl. "Well, damn, didn't see that coming." The kill house squatted on the far edge of the base like a concrete tumor. 2 stories of rooms and corridors designed to simulate the urban warfare environments where SEALs did their bloodiest work. Fallujah, Ramadi, Mosul. Every operator who survived those cities had spent hundreds of hours in structures like this, rehearsing the muscle memory that meant the difference between killing the enemy and dying in a doorway. Meredith sat in the observation booth, a wall of bulletproof glass separating her from the controlled violence about to unfold. 6 cameras provided views of every angle. A clipboard rested on her lap, blank except for the header she'd written in precise block letters. Tactical Assessment, Colvin, G. At 1000 hours exactly, Team 7 stacked up at the entry point. Garrett Colvin took point. Behind him, the team arranged itself in the fluid formation of men who'd done this so many times they no longer needed verbal communication. Hand signals, weight shifts, the angle of a weapon muzzle, an entire language spoken in fractions of seconds. The scenario was simple. 6 hostages, 8 hostile targets represented by pop-up silhouettes programmed to appear in random patterns. 4 rooms across 2 floors. Standard time limit for a team of this caliber, 3 minutes. Meredith activated the timer and leaned forward. Colvin breached the first door with textbook precision. The team flowed through like water, each operator covering his sector with the kind of spatial awareness that came from years of forcing your brain to process information faster than conscious thought. Room clear. 2 pop-up targets down before they'd fully extended. Time, 12 seconds. Stairwell. Colvin moved with aggressive speed, using momentum as a weapon. The team bounded up behind him, leapfrogging coverage. A pop-up hostile appeared at the landing. 3 operators fired simultaneously. The target shredded. Time, 28 seconds. Second floor. Colvin kicked the first door, and Drummond flowed through to clear left, while Colvin cleared right. Standard tactics. Brotherhood through violence. Meredith's pen moved across the clipboard. She wasn't watching for successes. Successes were expected from operators at this level. She was hunting for the near-invisible mistakes that separated competence from excellence. The micro-error that got men killed in the real world, where enemy fighters didn't politely pop up in predictable patterns. Room 3. Colvin entered with Lawson Briggs stacking behind. The lieutenant cleared right, fast, efficient, proper weapon control. Briggs cleared left, but for exactly 1.3 seconds, there was a blind spot. 45 degrees high right, above Colvin's sightline, below Briggs's coverage arc. Meredith made a note. In Fallujah 2006, Marines clearing houses had learned that insurgents hid in exactly that blind spot, wedged into ceiling corners, above door frames, places Western soldiers didn't instinctively check because Western combat doctrine didn't account for fighters willing to contort themselves into impossible spaces and wait for hours. 3 Marines had died before the lesson was learned. Colvin had just died too, in every universe where this wasn't training. The scenario continued. Boone Rafferty took an overwatch position in a second-floor window, covering the street approach. Standard sniper doctrine, proper angle, except the window placed him in backlight from the morning sun, silhouetting his position. In Mosul, 2016, Meredith had watched an ISIS sniper kill a SEAL from 800 meters because of exactly this mistake. The shooter had aimed at the shadow, not the man, and the shadow had been enough. Time, 2 minutes, 47 seconds. All hostiles neutralized. 0 simulated friendly casualties. Team 7 exfiltrated with textbook efficiency. By the metrics anyone else would use, perfect execution. Meredith kept writing. At 1700 hours, Team 7 assembled in the briefing room. They carried themselves with the quiet confidence of men who knew they'd performed flawlessly. Colvin stood at ease near the front, arms crossed, the ghost of a satisfied smile playing at the corner of his mouth. Meredith entered carrying her clipboard and a laptop. She connected the laptop to the projection system without speaking. The screen flickered to life, showing frozen footage from the kill house's camera system. She stood beside the screen and met each man's eyes in turn. Let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. 2 minutes, 47 seconds, she said finally. Textbook execution, by the numbers. If I were grading this as a training evolution, you'd all pass. She paused. But I'm not grading this as training. I'm grading this as if your lives depended on it. She clicked the laptop. The footage began to play in slow motion. Second 12. She froze the image as Colvin entered the first room. You cleared center mass perfectly, but notice your muzzle angle. She drew a laser pointer, highlighting the rifle's barrel orientation. You're aimed at chest height for a standing threat. In Ramadi, insurgents learned to attack from prone positions, firing from ground level. Your first shots would have gone high. By the time you corrected, you'd be dead. Colvin's smile vanished. Second 28. She advanced the footage to the stairwell. 3 operators fired simultaneously at a single target. Excellent instinct for overwhelming force. But you just fired 15 rounds, 5 from each rifle, into a target that died from the first shot. That's 14 wasted rounds. In a real scenario with unknown enemy numbers, ammunition discipline means survival. You just reduced your combat load by nearly half a magazine, for nothing. She continued, methodical and merciless. Second 58, room 3. The footage showed Colvin and Briggs clearing in perfect synchronization. Watch this corner. She highlighted the blind spot. 1.3 seconds of 0 coverage. 45 degrees, high right. In Fallujah, November 2006, 3 Marines died clearing a house because an insurgent was hiding in exactly this position. I know because I was there. I watched the after-action footage. I watched good men bleed out because they cleared by the book, and the book didn't account for enemy fighters willing to fold themselves into spaces we didn't think to check. The room had gone cold. Men who'd been proud minutes ago now stared at the screen with the sick realization that they'd been walking corpses and hadn't known it. Meredith advanced to Rafferty's overwatch position. Senior Chief, excellent instinct taking elevated position, perfect angle. One problem. She zoomed in on the window. Backlight. The sun silhouettes your position. In Mosul, March 2016, I was part of a QRF responding to a SEAL team under fire. By the time we arrived, their overwatch was dead. ISIS sniper, 800 meters, shot him through the shadow. The shooter never saw the man, just the target the sun painted on the wall behind him. Boone Rafferty's jaw worked. He said nothing. Meredith closed the laptop, turned to face the team. I found 7 mistakes, 7 moments where one or more of you would have died if this were real combat. You ran this evolution by the book, Lieutenant Colvin, and the book is written by survivors. But there's another book, written in blood by men who didn't come home. That's the book I've studied. She picked up her clipboard, held it at her side. You wanted to know if I'm a diversity hire. Here's your answer. I've spent 15 years in combat zones learning from both books. I've seen what works in training fail in combat. I've watched men die because they did everything right according to doctrine that didn't account for enemies who don't read our manuals. Her voice remained flat, unemotional. The words landed like artillery. I don't give a damn if you like me. I don't give a damn if you think I deserve this command. But if you follow me, I will bring you home alive. Because I will never ask you to do something by the book if the book is wrong. She set the clipboard on the table. Questions? The silence stretched. Garrett Colvin stared at the frozen image on the screen, his own form, clearing a room, oblivious to the kill zone above his head. Finally, he spoke. No questions, ma'am. Dismissed. The team filed out. Meredith remained behind, alone in the briefing room. She allowed herself a single long breath. Let the tension drain from her shoulders for just a moment. She'd won the first battle. But she knew men like Colvin. Respect wasn't given in a single afternoon. It was built through repetition, through proving herself again and again until doubt became impossible. She gathered her materials and headed for the door. Tomorrow would bring another test, and another. BUD/S had taught her one lesson above all others. When quitting becomes impossible, the only option is to keep moving forward. She'd apply that lesson here. Day 3 arrived with the scream of an alert klaxon at 0530 hours. Meredith was already awake, old habits from deployment, where sleeping too deeply meant dying in your rack when mortars fell. She'd been running the seawall, 5 miles in the dark, maintaining the conditioning that every SEAL knew could mean the difference between completing a mission and becoming a casualty. The klaxon meant one thing: real-world tasking. She sprinted back to the team room, arriving as the rest of Team 7 filtered in with the groggy alertness of operators who'd learned to function on adrenaline and coffee. Colvin nodded to her, not friendly, but acknowledging. Progress. At 0600 hours, the briefing room filled with bodies and tension. A woman Meredith didn't recognize stood at the front, 40-something, with the hard eyes of someone who'd spent years in places where American passports meant nothing. She wore civilian clothes but carried herself with the posture of someone trained to violence. CIA, Meredith guessed. The kind of officer who ran assets in countries where capture meant torture and death. I'm Deirdre Navarro, the woman said without preamble. Africa Operations. She activated the projection system. An image appeared, satellite footage of a coastal city, whitewashed buildings crowded against harbor waters. Berbera, Somalia, northern coast. 14 hours ago, the container ship MV Seaborne Liberty was boarded by unknown hostiles approximately 40 nautical miles offshore. The crew, 12 American citizens, were taken hostage and moved to this location. She zoomed in. A warehouse complex near the waterfront, surrounded by smaller buildings and narrow streets. Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility through their usual propaganda channels. They're demanding $5 million in the release of 3 prisoners currently held at Guantanamo Bay. Standard terrorist playbook. What makes this non-standard is the timeline. Navarro's expression hardened. Intel suggests the hostages will be moved inland within 48 hours. Once they're in the interior, rescue becomes effectively impossible. Somalia is a failed state. No government control outside the major cities. Al-Shabaab controls the countryside like feudal warlords. She clicked to another image. Drone footage, grainy but clear enough to see human shapes moving in patterns around the warehouse. We have ISR assets overhead, approximately 15 to 20 hostiles visible, mostly Somali militia based on their movement patterns and equipment. AK-47s, RPGs, technical vehicles. She paused. But there's an anomaly. The footage zoomed in on a cluster of figures moving with different body language, more professional, more controlled. These individuals don't move like militia. Their patrol rotations are textbook military, 4-hour watch cycles, interlocking fields of fire, disciplined radio communication. The CIA's assessment is that these are not al-Shabaab fighters. Meredith leaned forward, studied the figures, their posture, their spacing, the way they held their weapons, not casually slung but ready, professional. Wagner Group, she said. Every head in the room turned toward her. Navarro's eyebrows rose. That's the theory. Russian military contractors. What makes you so certain? Meredith pointed at the screen. The spacing, 5 meters between patrol members, staggered positioning to avoid bunching. Somali militia bunch up because they're not trained to think about indirect fire or coordinated attacks. These men are thinking about overlapping fields of fire and mutual support. She traced the patrol route with her finger. In this pattern, northeast to southwest, 40-meter intervals, that's Russian doctrine. Soviet-era infantry tactics updated for modern urban warfare. I saw the same patterns in Syria when Wagner was operating against ISIS. Captain Vance Rayburn, the senior JSOC officer present, studied her with new interest. Rayburn was old-school SEAL, 50-something, with a reputation for valuing results over politics. He'd been a friend of Commander Reeves. His doubt about Meredith's appointment had been barely concealed. Commander Kincaid, you have solid evidence for this assessment? No, sir. Just 15 years watching how different forces move. Al-Shabaab fighters are brave but undisciplined. They don't maintain formation under stress. Wagner mercenaries are professionals. They move like soldiers because most of them are former Russian military. Spetsnaz, VDV, officers who know their trade. She looked at Navarro. If Wagner's involved, this isn't a simple hostage situation. Wagner doesn't deploy for ransom money. They're playing a different game. Navarro nodded slowly. There's a complication. One of the 12 hostages is Dr. Evelyn Cortland. She's listed as a civilian contractor, but that's a cover. She's a biochemist. Defense Department, classified research. She has access to extremely sensitive information about bioweapons defense programs. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. If Wagner Group is facilitating her extraction, Navarro continued, we have to assume she's either being coerced or, she let the implication hang, or she's defecting, Meredith finished, selling information to whoever's paying. It's a possibility we can't ignore. Rayburn stood. Team 7, you're tasked for immediate deployment. USS Bataan is positioned 85 nautical miles off the Somali coast. You'll stage from there. Mission is hostage rescue. Secondary objective is securing Dr. Cortland alive. He looked at Meredith. Commander Kincaid, this is your operation. Mission planning begins immediately. Launch window is 1800 hours. Questions? Meredith's mind was already racing through options, contingencies, the 1,000 variables that meant success or failure. Sir, request permission to develop 2 separate mission plans, one assuming standard al-Shabaab resistance, one assuming Wagner Group professional military opposition. Granted. Anything else? Yes, sir. I want 6 hours to analyze the ISR footage frame by frame. If Wagner's there, they'll have set up defensive positions. I need to find their weak points before we step into their kill zone. Rayburn smiled, the first genuine smile he'd shown her since her appointment. Get to work, Commander. The mission planning room became Meredith's world for the next 6 hours. She sent the team to prep gear and rest while she sat alone with a dozen screens showing different angles of the target compound. Frame by frame, she watched the patterns, learned the rhythm of the place. The warehouse sat 50 meters from the waterfront. 3 stories, concrete construction, flat roof with what looked like AC units, and a cluster of satellite communication equipment. The main entrance faced east toward a narrow street crowded with smaller buildings. 2 side entrances, both covered by technical vehicles, pickup trucks with heavy machine guns mounted in the beds. The perimeter had 6 roving patrols, 2-man teams, cycling every 4 hours. Professional, disciplined, definitely not militia. But professionalism created predictability. Meredith traced the patrol routes on a tablet, building a digital map of movement patterns. The patrols focused on the street approaches, the obvious assault vectors. Strong perimeter defense covering the likely angles of attack, which meant the unlikely angles were weak. She zoomed in on the waterfront side of the warehouse, the side facing open water. No patrol coverage there. Why would there be? An assault from the waterfront meant exposing yourself against the harbor lights. Tactical suicide. Any military doctrine would teach you to avoid illuminated approaches. But SEALs weren't soldiers. They were sailors first. The water wasn't a weakness. It was home. Meredith leaned back, the ghost of a plan forming. Risky, aggressive. The kind of approach that broke conventional doctrine because conventional doctrine was written for conventional forces. Team 7 wasn't conventional. She pulled up the satellite imagery showing the broader harbor area, calculated distances, approach angles, timing windows. At 1400 hours, she called the team back for briefing. They assembled, gear stacked and ready. Colvin looked at her expectantly. The doubt had receded from his eyes. Not trust yet, but willingness to listen. Meredith activated the display. Gentlemen, here's the situation. Wagner Group is present at the target location. Approximately 6 to 8 mercenaries based on patrol patterns, plus 12 to 15 Somali militia. Total hostile force estimated at 18 to 23. She let that sink in. 8 SEALs against 20-plus enemies in a fortified position. Standard assault doctrine says we request additional assets, combat support, maybe a ranger company for overwhelming force. She shook her head. But standard assault takes time we don't have. And standard assault plays to their strengths. They've set up defensive positions covering all the obvious approach routes. She zoomed in on the waterfront side of the warehouse. So we're not coming from the obvious directions. We're coming from here, the water. Boone Rafferty frowned. Ma'am, that approach is fully illuminated. Harbor lights, ambient glow from the city, we'd be exposed. Exactly, which is why they won't be watching it. Wagner's doctrine is Soviet-derived. Russian military training emphasizes avoiding exposed approaches. They assume we think the same way. Meredith traced the route with her laser pointer. We infiltrate by RHIB, come ashore 4 kilometers south of the target. Overland approach to the harbor. At 0330 hours, we hit them from the waterfront while they're watching the streets. Thaddeus Drummond studied the display. What about breach points? Those walls look like reinforced concrete. You and Strand will place C4 charges on vehicles here and here. She marked positions 200 meters north of the compound. Diversionary explosions. While Wagner reacts to that, Sullivan and Hayes create a feint attack at the main entrance. Draw their attention forward. During that confusion, Alpha Element, me, Colvin, and Briggs breach the waterfront wall with shaped charges. We go in fast, silent, and hit them while they're focused on the wrong threat. She looked at Rafferty. Senior Chief, you'll establish overwatch here. She indicated a rooftop adjacent to the warehouse. Elevated position, clear sight lines. You and 2 others provide precision fire support. Garrett Colvin was nodding slowly. It's aggressive, splits our force. High risk. High risk, Meredith agreed. But it exploits their doctrine. Wagner trains to fight enemies who follow predictable patterns. We're not going to be predictable. What about Dr. Cortland? Lawson Briggs asked. If she's really defecting, she might not want to be rescued. Then we adapt. Mission priority is secure all hostages and neutralize the threat. How Cortland behaves determines how we handle her. Meredith's voice went cold. But understand this, if she's turned traitor and she's carrying classified information that could kill Americans, she doesn't leave that warehouse except in our custody. Clear? 8 heads nodded. Good. We launch at 1800 hours. 5 hours to prep. Get your gear squared away. Get your heads right. And gentlemen? She waited until every eye was on her. This is real world, No training safety protocols. No do-overs. You follow my commands exactly when I give them, and I'll bring you all home. Trust me or don't, but once we're on target, hesitation kills. Questions? Silence. Dismissed. As the team filed out, Garrett Colvin lingered. He approached Meredith with the careful body language of a man navigating unfamiliar territory. "Commander, about what I said on day one." He stopped, started again. "I was out of line. You've proven yourself. I want you to know you have my trust." Meredith met his eyes. "Trust isn't proven in a briefing room, Lieutenant. It's proven when bullets start flying, and you have to decide if you'll follow my commands or your instinct." She softened slightly. "Ask me again after we're home." Colvin nodded, extended his hand. She shook it. Firm grip, no hesitation. "After we're home," he agreed. 2,200 hours. Meredith stood alone on the USS Baton's deck, watching moonlight reflect off the Indian Ocean. The ship cut through dark water with the steady purpose of machinery built for war. Behind her, Team 7 was in the hangar bay doing final equipment checks. In 6 hours, they'd launch into uncertainty. Footsteps approached. She didn't turn. "Commander Kincaid." Rear Admiral Duncan Greer's voice carried decades of command authority. He was 62 years old, silver-haired, with eyes that had watched too many young operators die in distant countries. He'd been a lieutenant commander when Meredith was still in high school, dreaming of proving herself in a world that didn't think women belonged in combat. He'd been her mentor through every milestone, her advocate when others doubted, the reason she was standing here now. "Sir." She turned, snapped a salute. He returned it, then moved to stand beside her at the rail. For a moment, they both watched the water. "Hell of a first week," Greer said finally. "Could be worse. Nobody's shot at me yet." He smiled. "Give it time." The smile faded. "Meredith, I need to tell you something about this mission. Something that doesn't leave this conversation." She turned to face him fully. His expression was grave. "Dr. Evelyn Cortland, the CIA's theory about possible defection isn't just theory. 48 hours ago, we intercepted communications between Wagner Group and an unknown third party. The details were encrypted, but the NSA pulled enough fragments to build a picture. Cortland has been in contact with Wagner for at least 2 months. This whole hostage situation, it's theater. She's not being rescued, she's being extracted." The ocean suddenly felt colder. "Sir, if you've known this for 48 hours, why are we just now?" "Because I needed to see how you'd handle incomplete information." Greer's voice was hard, unapologetic. "Real command means making decisions when you don't have the full picture. Politicians lie. Allies betray. Intelligence is always incomplete. I couldn't hand you a perfect mission brief and expect you to grow as a leader." Meredith felt anger rising like bile. "You sent my team into an operation with deliberately withheld intelligence? Sir, that's command." Greer cut her off. "You think Reeves always had complete information? You think any commander does? I'm training you for the real world, Meredith. The world where perfect information doesn't exist and you still have to make the call." He stepped closer. His voice lowered but lost none of its intensity. "Here's what I know about you. You're tactically brilliant, physically capable, mentally tough. But the question I couldn't answer until now was whether you could lead when everything goes to hell, when the mission parameters change mid-operation, when you have to adapt in real time with lives on the line. So this whole thing is a test? Everything is a test. The difference is whether you know it or not." He pulled a photograph from his pocket, handed it to her. Evelyn Cortland, mid-40s, blonde hair pulled back, intelligent eyes behind frameless glasses. She looked like someone's aunt, not a traitor. Cortland's research was cutting-edge bioweapons defense, Soviet-era agents, weaponized pathogens. 15 years ago when I was a captain, I sat on the oversight committee that cut her program's funding. We had ethical concerns about the research direction. Cortland took it personally, believed we were sabotaging important work. Greer took the photograph back, stared at it. I made that call based on the information I had. It was the right call. But the consequence is standing on a Somalia waterfront right now, ready to sell information to whoever's buying. My decision, my responsibility. He looked at Meredith. That's leadership. Making calls you believe are right and living with the outcomes, even when those outcomes haunt you decades later. What are you telling me, sir? That I should expect my decisions to create future traitors? I'm telling you that command means accepting you'll never have a clean conscience. Every decision has consequences. Some you'll see immediately, some won't show up until years later. He straightened. Your mission is to bring back those hostages and secure Cortland. How you do that is your call. If she's truly defected, if she resists, you handle it however you see fit. I trust your judgment. Even though you've been testing me, I'm testing you because I trust you. If I didn't believe you could handle this, I never would have put you in command. He turned to go, then paused. One more thing. Garrett Colvin sent me a message this evening. Private communication. Want to know what it said? Meredith waited. He said, and I quote, Commander Kincaid is the finest tactical mind I've worked with. I'd follow her into hell. Coming from Colvin, that's higher praise than any medal I could pin on your chest. Greer smiled slightly. Prove me right, Meredith. Bring them home. He walked away, leaving her alone with moonlight and dark water. Meredith stood there for a long time, processing everything. The betrayal of incomplete intelligence, the harsh lesson about command, the responsibility that came with leading men into violence. Somewhere below deck, Team 7 was loading magazines and checking night vision optics, preparing for an operation they didn't know was more complicated than the briefing had revealed, trusting her to lead them through whatever hell waited in Somalia. She looked at her hands, steady, no tremor. Fear was acceptable, showing it wasn't. Hell of a first week, she whispered to the ocean. Then she turned and headed below to join her team. In 6 hours, they would launch into darkness. In 6 hours, she would prove whether Duncan Greer's faith was justified. In 6 hours, doubt would become irrelevant. There would only be the mission, and the men counting on her to bring them home alive. The RHIB knifed through black water, engine throttled low to minimize signature. 2 rigid-hull, inflatable boats, 8 operators split between them, moving toward a hostile shore under a 3/4 moon. The USS Baton had disappeared behind them an hour ago, swallowed by distance and darkness. Now there was only the Indian Ocean, vast and indifferent, and the Somali coastline ahead painted silver by moonlight. Meredith crouched in the lead boat's bow, one hand gripping the safety line, the other resting on her HK-416. The rifle hung across her chest on a 3-point sling, suppressor threaded onto the barrel, 30 rounds of 5.56 millimeter ammunition ready to fire. 6 additional magazines rode in her plate carrier pouches. Fragmentation grenades, flashbangs, combat knife, the tools of violence familiar as her own heartbeat. Beside her, Garrett Colvin checked his watch for the 3rd time in as many minutes. 02:47 hours. They were behind schedule by 3 minutes. Not critical yet, but margins mattered in operations like this. Timing was the difference between surprise and slaughter. The sea state had been worse than forecast. 6-foot swells instead of 3. The boats pitched and rolled, salt spray soaking through their gear. Meredith's night vision goggles turned the world into shades of green and black, the horizon a jagged line where ocean met sky. She'd spent enough time in small boats during her career to know that seasickness was mind over matter. You couldn't afford to be sick, so you weren't. Behind them, the 2nd RHIB maintained position 50 meters back. Boone Rafferty, visible in the bow, his MK-17 Scar H held with the casual competence of a man who'd made impossible shots in worse conditions. The rest of Team 7 distributed between the boats, each operator locked into the pre-mission focus that turned men into weapons. Lawson Briggs sat amidships, tablet glowing faintly in his lap. He was piloting the RQ-20 Puma drone they'd launched from the Bataan, the small UAV circling 3,000 feet above the target area, feeding real-time infrared imagery to his screen. His MIT education showed in moments like this, the way he manipulated code and sensor feeds with the ease of someone who thought in algorithms. His face was lit from below, making him look younger than 26, making him look like someone who should be in a college dorm, not approaching a hostile shore with lethal intent. "Commander," who said quietly, voice barely audible over the engine noise. "Drone feed shows no change in patrol patterns. 6 roving teams, same routes as earlier reconnaissance. No indication they've detected our approach." "Copy," Meredith keyed her radio, encrypted frequency linking all Team 7 operators. "All elements, prepare for beach insertion. 4 minutes out, maintain noise discipline." 8 clicks of acknowledgement came back. No voices, just the simple confirmation that her commands had been received and understood. The coastline resolved from a dark smudge into distinguishable features. Sandy beach, scrub vegetation beyond, the scattered lights of Berbera's outskirts painting the sky with ambient glow. The warehouse district sat 3 kilometers to the north, marked by the brighter concentration of harbor lighting. At 02:55, the boat's coxswains killed the engines. Momentum carried them the final 100 meters to shore, silent except for the rush of water against rubber hulls. The boat's keels scraped sand with a sound like a whispered warning. Team 7 dismounted with practiced efficiency. Boots hit shallow water, operators spreading into a defensive perimeter, while the coxswains secured the boats and prepped them for emergency extraction if needed. The beach was deserted. No lights, no movement except wind-driven sand and the eternal rhythm of waves. Meredith took a knee in the sand, weapon up, scanning her sector through night vision. Nothing. The universe held its breath. "Rally Point Alpha," she whispered into her radio. "Move." The team collapsed from their perimeter into a tactical column, 8 operators moving in fluid coordination up the beach toward the vegetation line. Each man knew his position in the stack. Each man covered his assigned sector without needing to be told. This was the product of thousands of hours training together until movement became collective muscle memory. They reached the scrub line and pushed inland. Somalia smelled like dust and diesel, and something organic that might have been rotting fish or might have been human waste. The outskirts of failed states all smelled similar. Poverty had a scent you couldn't wash away. The team moved through shadows between buildings, avoiding the few lit structures where people might still be awake. Dogs barked in the distance. Somewhere a generator coughed and died. Normal night sounds in a place where infrastructure was a memory. Meredith navigated by GPS unit mounted on her wrist, comparing their position to the pre-planned route. They had 2 kilometers to cover before reaching their staging position. 2 kilometers through potentially hostile territory where any wrong turn could mean discovery. At 03:15, Lawson Briggs raised his fist. The column froze. "Commander," who whispered, "drone shows thermal signature 200 meters ahead. Stationary position, elevated. Looks like an observation post." Meredith moved up to his position, studied the tablet display. The thermal bloom showed 2 human figures on what appeared to be a rooftop overlooking their planned route. Armed, alert, professional positioning for an OP. She made the calculation instantly. Bypassing the OP meant changing their route, adding 10 minutes and risking other unknown positions. Neutralizing it meant potential noise, potential alarm. But leaving it meant hostile eyes on their backs. "We take them," she decided. "Silent. Rafferty, Hayes, you're with me. Colvin, hold position with the main element. We'll signal when clear." 3 operators split from the column. Meredith led, moving with the careful, stalking pace hunters use when approaching wary prey. each footfall placed deliberately, each breath controlled. The night vision turned the world into a landscape of contrasts where shadows held death. They approached the building from downwind. A two-story structure, concrete block construction, metal stairs leading to the roof. The kind of building that filled third-world cities, utilitarian and ugly. Boone Rafferty took position at the base of the stairs, MK-17 shouldered, scope aligned. His role was overwatch. If the close quarters approach went wrong, he dropped both hostiles before they could raise an alarm. Meredith and Rourke Hayes ascended the stairs, metal treads under their boots, each step a potential betrayal. But the stairs were well maintained, no rust-induced squeaks. Someone had been using this OP regularly, professional tradecraft. They reached the roof access. Meredith peered around the corner. The OP was 15 meters away, positioned behind a low wall that provided cover from ground-level observation. Two men silhouetted against the lighter sky beyond. They weren't Somali, Caucasian features, military haircuts, body language that spoke of training and discipline. They carried AK-12 rifles, the modern Russian variant, and wore what looked like Ratnik combat gear. Wagner Group, no question. The confirmation settled something in Meredith's mind. She'd been right about their presence, but being right brought no satisfaction, only the cold knowledge that this operation was more dangerous than the official briefing had acknowledged. She signaled Hayes, simple hand gestures in the darkness. He would take the left target, she would take right. Simultaneous engagement, no room for error. They moved together, swift and silent. 10 meters, 5. The sentries were focused outward, scanning the approaches to the harbor, never expecting death to come from behind. 3 meters. Hayes raised his suppressed HK-416. Meredith mirrored the movement. They fired within a tenth of a second of each other. Subsonic, 5. 56-millimeter rounds. Barely louder than hands clapping. Both sentries dropped without a sound beyond the thud of bodies hitting concrete. Meredith moved to the nearest body, checking for vital signs out of habit more than hope. Center mass shots from this range left no ambiguity. The man was dead, eyes open and unseeing. A Wagner Group patch visible on his uniform shoulder. She searched his gear quickly. Tactical radio with Cyrillic text on the display. Spare magazines. A phone with Russian language interface. She keyed her radio. Targets neutralized. OP clear. All elements move up. The main column emerged from the shadows and continued north. Two bodies remained on the rooftop, temporarily hidden but inevitably discoverable. The clock was ticking now. Wagner would notice the missing OP eventually. Maybe at the next radio check-in. Maybe when the relief team arrived. However it happened, discovery was inevitable, which meant Team 7's window of surprise was shrinking with every passing minute. They reached the final staging position at 0328, a cluster of cargo containers 200 meters south of the target warehouse, providing concealment and a vantage point for final reconnaissance. The team took cover among the containers while Lawson Briggs pulled up the latest drone footage. The warehouse sat in a pool of artificial light, 3 stories of concrete and steel, lit by harsh sodium vapor lamps that turned everything yellow-orange. The main entrance faced east, guarded by 2 technical vehicles with mounted heavy machine guns. Sentries visible at the corners. More movement on the roof. Meredith studied the display with growing unease. The defensive setup was even more professional than the earlier reconnaissance had shown. Interlocking fields of fire, covered approaches, disciplined patrol rotations. This wasn't a hasty position. Wagner had been here for days at minimum, preparing. Count 19 visible hostiles, Briggs reported. 9 on the perimeter, 4 in the main building, 6 on adjacent structures. That's more than initial estimates suggested. Garrett Colvin moved beside Meredith, kept his voice low. Commander, those odds aren't favorable. 8 against 19 in a prepared defensive position. Maybe we should request additional assets. It was a reasonable suggestion. The kind of suggestion a responsible officer would make when facing a force more than twice his size. Meredith considered it for exactly 3 seconds. By the time additional assets arrive, Cortland will be gone. Wagner knows we're coming eventually. They'll accelerate their timeline. She looked at Colvin. We have surprise. We have better training. And we have no choice. We go now. She pulled the team into a tight circle, low whispers in the darkness between cargo containers. Situation: Wagner Group is present in force. Minimum 19 hostiles, professional military opposition. Our advantage is they don't know we're here yet. Our objective is to hit them while they're watching the wrong directions. She sketched in the dirt with her knife blade, quick strokes creating a simplified map of the warehouse and surrounding area. Drummond, Strand, you'll move to these parked vehicles. She marked positions 200 meters north. Place charges, time detonation at 0337. Maximum noise and fire. Make them think the attack is coming from the north. The two EOD specialists nodded. Sullivan, Hayes, at 0337 plus 15 seconds, you'll engage at the main entrance. Suppressed fire initially, then switch to unsuppressed to draw attention. You're the feint. Make them think you're the primary assault. How long do we sustain? Cormac Sullivan asked. 2 minutes, then break contact and exfil to Rally Point Bravo. Don't be heroes. Your job is distraction, not victory. She turned to Boone Rafferty. Senior Chief, you'll take position on this rooftop with one other. Elevated overwatch. When Alpha Element breaches, Wagner will reposition to respond. You kill anyone who tries to flank us. And Alpha Element? Colvin asked, though he already knew the answer. You, me, and Briggs, once he's set the Senior Chief up, will breach the waterfront wall during the confusion. Fast entry, find the hostages, secure Cortland, extract before Wagner can reorganize. Thaddeus Drummond studied the crude map. Commander, this plan is aggressive as hell. If timing slips by even 30 seconds, Alpha gets caught in a kill zone. Then we don't slip. Meredith met each operator's eyes in turn. Gentlemen, this is what we do. Fast, violent, unpredictable. Wagner trains to fight conventional forces. We're not conventional. Questions? Silence. Not because there were no doubts, but because doubts were irrelevant now. They were committed. Time hack. 0330 on my mark. She checked her watch. 3, 2, 1. Mark. 8 watches synchronized. 8 operators checked weapons one final time. 8 men prepared to walk into violence. Execute. The team split. Drummond and Strand disappeared into the darkness, moving toward their target vehicles. Sullivan and Hayes peeled off toward the main gate approach. Rafferty led Eli Strand to the designated overwatch position. That left Meredith, Colvin, and Lawson Briggs as Alpha Element. They moved toward the waterfront side of the warehouse, the approach that conventional doctrine said was suicide. Exposed, illuminated, everything military training taught you to avoid, which was precisely why Wagner wouldn't be watching it closely. At 0335, they were in position 50 meters from the warehouse's seaside wall, concealed behind a stack of pallets that smelled like rotting fish and diesel fuel. The wall loomed ahead, blank concrete, no windows on the ground floor. A breach point that would require explosives. Colvin had already prepped the charges during their approach. C4 wrapped in a breaching configuration, designed to blow a man-sized hole through reinforced concrete without bringing down the entire structure. He placed the charge at the base of the wall with the careful precision of someone who'd done this dozens of times in a dozen countries. Meredith checked her watch. 0336. 45 seconds until Drummond's diversionary explosion. Her heart rate was elevated but steady, adrenaline sharpening her senses without overwhelming her judgment. This was the edge where fear became fuel. 30 seconds. She could hear voices from inside the warehouse. Somali or Russian, impossible to tell at this distance. Normal conversation, no alarm. Wagner still thought they owned the night. 15 seconds. Meredith clicked her radio selector to the command frequency. All elements stand by. Execute on schedule. 10 seconds. Colvin moved beside her, one hand on the detonator for the breaching charge, the other on his rifle. Lawson Briggs covered their six. Young face composed despite the violence about to unfold. 5 seconds. The universe contracted to this moment, this breath, this heartbeat. 0337. 200 meters north, Drummond's charges detonated. 3 vehicles erupted in simultaneous fireballs, the explosions massive enough to rattle windows across the harbor district. Flames shot 30 feet into the air. Secondary detonations as fuel tanks ruptured and ammunition cooked off. Wagner responded exactly as predicted. Shouting, running feet, weapons fire as sentries engaged shadows to the north. The entire defensive focus pivoted toward the perceived threat. Now, Meredith commanded. Colvin triggered the breaching charge. The explosion was sharp and directional, punching through the concrete wall with a sound like thunder compressed into a microsecond. Dust and debris erupted. Before it settled, Alpha Element was moving. Meredith went through first, training and instinct overriding the lizard brain fear of entering an unknown space through a fresh breach. Her rifle came up, night vision piercing the dust, and she was inside. Storage room, crates stacked floor to ceiling, empty of personnel. She flowed right, clearing her sector. Colvin came through behind her, clearing left. Briggs covered the doorway leading deeper into the structure. Outside, Sullivan and Hayes opened fire at the main entrance. The distinctive crack of 5.56 millimeter rounds, suppressed at first, then deliberately loud, drawing attention, selling the feint. Alpha Element moved to the interior door. Meredith tested it, unlocked. She pulled it open and moved through into a corridor lit by bare bulbs. The hallway stretched 20 meters, doors on both sides, stairs at the far end, leading up. Movement to her left. 2 men emerging from a side room, Somali militia by their appearance, carrying AK-47s, but not yet raising them. Confusion on their faces as they tried to process what was happening. Meredith fired twice. Controlled pairs, center mass. Both men dropped. The suppressed rifle barely louder than a pneumatic nail gun. Colvin moved past the bodies, clearing the room they'd emerged from. Empty. They reached the stairs. Voices above, shouting in Russian now. Wagner responding to the chaos, trying to understand the tactical situation. The explosions to the north were the obvious threat. The breach to the south hadn't been discovered yet. Meredith led the way up. Tactical ascent, weapon tracking with her eyes, each step a commitment. The stairwell opened onto a second-floor corridor. More doors, more unknowns. The third door on the right stood partially open. Light spilled out. Meredith heard American voices inside, frightened, pleading. She stacked beside the door with Colvin behind her. Hand signals. On 3. 1, 2, 3. She pushed through, rifle up, scanning for threats. The room was large, maybe 30 feet square, filled with people. 11 Americans sat against the far wall, hands zip-tied, faces drawn with fear and exhaustion. One Somali guard stood over them with an AK-47, his head swiveling toward the door as Meredith entered. She shot him before he could bring the rifle to bear. Single shot, suppressed. He collapsed. The hostages recoiled, not understanding yet whether this was rescue or additional threat. Meredith lowered her weapon slightly, spoke quickly. U.S. Navy, we're getting you out. Stay quiet, stay calm. Relief flooded their faces. A middle-aged woman in torn business clothes began crying. Huge, silent sobs that shook her whole body. The man beside her, gray-haired with a captain's insignia on his filthy shirt, tried to stand and Colvin gently pushed him back down. Thank God, the captain whispered, voice hoarse from days of screaming or dehydration or both. They said no one was coming, that America had abandoned us. We don't abandon our people, Meredith said. Simple words, true words, the only words that mattered. A younger man, maybe 30, wearing glasses held together with duct tape, pointed toward the ceiling. The woman, the doctor, they took her upstairs yesterday. She wasn't tied up, she was talking with them, in English, friendly. The confirmation hit like a gut punch, but Meredith kept her face neutral. Colvin, secure these people. Cut their restraints, get them ready to move. Briggs, stay with him. I'm going up. Commander, we should wait for backup, Colvin started. No time. Wagner's going to figure out the feint any second now. I need Cortland before they extract her. She didn't wait for argument. Moved back to the corridor, found the next stairwell, ascended to the third floor. Her radio crackled. Boone Rafferty's voice, calm despite the firefight audible in the background. Reaper 1, Hawk. Wagner element moving toward your position from the north. 4 combatants. I can't get an angle. Copy, Hawk. Stay on your position. Alpha can handle it. The third floor was different. Not a warehouse level, but offices. The stairs opened onto a hallway with better lighting. Actual doors instead of the metal industrial barriers below. Corporate space, probably used by whatever shipping company had owned this facility before Somalia collapsed into chaos. Voices ahead. Russian. And English. A woman's voice, American accent, discussing something technical. Not frightened, professional. Meredith approached the office door at the hallway's end. Heavy steel, closed. A window beside it showed a command center setup. Computer equipment, radios, satellite uplink gear with a laptop connected via cables. And 2 people. Dr. Evelyn Cortland stood beside the desk, looking exactly like her photograph. Mid-40s, blonde hair pulled back, wearing civilian clothes that were too clean for someone who'd been held hostage. She studied the laptop screen with the focused expression of someone working on a complex problem. Beside her stood a man in his 50s, military bearing, scarred face, cold eyes that spoke of decades of violence. He wore Russian combat fatigues without insignia, but Meredith recognized the type. Wagner Group Commander, professional soldier who traded national loyalty for money. The laptop screen was visible through the window. A progress bar. Transfer in progress. 81% complete. Satellite uplink status indicators showing active transmission. They were uploading the data, right now, and in minutes it would be too late. Meredith didn't hesitate. She'd been trained to make decisions faster than conscious thought, when lives depended on speed. She raised her rifle, aimed not at the people, but at the satellite equipment visible through the window. The dish mounted outside, connected by cables to the uplink gear. One shot. The suppressed round punched through the window, through the uplink equipment, severing the connection in a shower of sparks. The laptop screen flashed an error message. Transfer interrupted. She kicked the door open and flowed into the room, rifle trained on the Russian commander. Colvin must have heard the shot because he was coming up the stairs behind her, boots pounding. The Wagner commander moved with combat reflexes, drawing a pistol from his holster and pointing it not at Meredith, but at the laptop. His message was clear. Drop your weapons or I destroy the data. Commander Kincaid, I presume, Dr. Cortland said. Her voice was steady, almost amused. Impressive approach, very creative, though I'm afraid you're about 4 minutes too late. Meredith kept her rifle aimed at the Russian's center mass. Step away from the laptop, both of you. Hands where I can see them. Cortland smiled, like this was a game she was winning. I'm still a United States citizen, Commander. You can't shoot me. Your rules of engagement protect me. Colonel Volkov knows this. That's why he's not particularly worried. The data, Meredith said flatly. How much was transmitted? 81% when you so rudely interrupted. Not complete, but enough for reverse engineering with the right laboratory resources. Cortland tilted her head. Moscow has partial data. Tehran has offered substantially more money for the complete package. Colonel Volkov was facilitating the auction. Such a shame you've complicated the transaction. Garrett Colvin entered behind Meredith, rifle up, covering the Russian. His presence changed the geometry of the room. Two guns on one target removed most of Volkov's leverage. But the Wagner commander was calculating odds behind those cold eyes. He was a professional. He knew when tactics had failed. His pistol remained pointed at the laptop, but his other hand moved slowly to his radio. "Colonel," Meredith said, her voice carrying the flat affect of someone past negotiation. "Don't." He keyed the radio anyway, started speaking Russian, rapid-fire words calling for backup, describing the situation. Meredith shifted her aim 6 inches left, fired through the window behind Volkov. The satellite dish outside exploded, shredded by the 5.56 millimeter round. The laptop screen went completely dark. Connection lost permanently. Volkov's head turned reflexively toward the destroyed equipment. Fatal mistake. His attention divided for a fraction of a second. Colvin shot him twice. Controlled pair, center mass. The Wagner commander crumpled. Dr. Cortland lunged for the laptop. Meredith was faster, tackling her before she reached the desk. They hit the floor hard, Cortland struggling with surprising strength, but she had no combat training, and Meredith had 15 years of experience subduing targets. Within seconds, Cortland was face down with her hands zip-tied behind her back. "You can't do this," Cortland hissed. "I have rights. I demand a lawyer." "You'll get one," Meredith said, "after we're back on American soil. Until then, you're cargo." She hauled Cortland to her feet. Colvin grabbed the laptop, yanking it free of its cables. The device would go to NSA analysts who would extract whatever data remained and determine what had been compromised. Meredith keyed her radio. "All elements, Alpha has secured HVT and intelligence materials. Hostages are secure. Prepare for extraction. QRF, what's your ETA?" The response came from the USS Baton's Combat Operations Center. "Reaper 1, QRF is airborne. 2 MH-60 Seahawks with fast rope teams. ETA 7 minutes. 7 minutes. An eternity in combat." Wagner forces would be converging now, realizing the northern explosions had been a diversion. The main assault had come from the waterfront, and their command element was down. "Copy. We'll be on the roof. Marking with infrared strobe." She looked at Colvin. "Get Cortland and the hostages upstairs. Roof extraction. I'll cover our rear." They moved fast, Colvin dragging Cortland, who'd stopped resisting and gone limp with the shocked resignation of someone whose plan had collapsed. Down the corridor, down the stairs, back to the second floor where Lawson Briggs had 11 frightened civilians standing in a cluster. "Roof, now," Meredith commanded. "Stay together. Move fast. We have air support inbound." The civilians climbed the stairs with the awkward urgency of people unused to physical exertion. Meredith positioned herself at the rear, rifle covering the approach from below. Outside, gunfire had intensified, Sullivan and Hayes executing their breakaway. Rafferty's Scar H booming from Overwatch. Each shot a precise kill. Her radio crackled again. Rafferty's voice, still calm but with an edge now. "Reaper 1, Hawk. Multiple hostiles moving to your building. Technical vehicle with mounted gun, 6 dismounts. I'm engaging, but they're closing fast." "Copy, Hawk. Air support is 3 minutes out. Hold your position." "Roger. But ma'am, one of those dismounts is carrying an RPG. If he gets close enough to the roof—" "I understand, Senior Chief. Do what you can." She reached the roof. The civilians were huddled near the center, as far from the edges as possible. Colvin had positioned himself at the roof's southern edge, covering the waterfront approach. Lawson Briggs monitored his drone feed, calling out enemy positions. Meredith activated her infrared strobe, attaching it to a rooftop vent where helicopter pilots would see it clearly through their night vision. A beacon for salvation, assuming salvation arrived before Wagner overran their position. Below, The technical vehicle Rafferty had warned about came into view. A Toyota pickup with a Russian PKM machine gun mounted in the bed. The gunner was traversing, looking for targets. If he spotted the SEALs on the roof, that 7.62 millimeter weapon would tear them apart. Boone Rafferty fired. The distinctive crack of his Scar H, followed by the technical's windshield exploding. The driver slumped. The truck swerved, crashed into a building's wall. The gunner tried to bring the PKM to bear but couldn't depress the barrel enough to hit the rooftop position. Wagner dismounts scattered, taking cover, returning fire toward Rafferty's position. Muzzle flashes in the darkness. Tracer rounds arcing upward. Then Meredith heard it, the deep, rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors. The most beautiful sound in the world to an operator waiting for extraction. Two MH-60 Seahawks materialized from the darkness, door gunners already engaging with M240 machine guns, pouring suppressive fire into the Wagner positions below. The first Seahawk flared above the warehouse roof. Fast rope teams deployed, 8 additional SEALs sliding down ropes in seconds, hitting the roof and immediately establishing a defensive perimeter. Professional. Textbook. The second Seahawk orbited, door gunners continuing to suppress enemy fire. The Wagner technical exploded as one of the door gunners walked 7.6 2mm rounds across its fuel tank. Flames erupted. Secondary explosions as ammunition cooked off. "All hostages move to the helicopter now," Meredith commanded. "Stay low, move fast." The civilians ran, bent at the waist, terror overcoming exhaustion. They were lifted into the Seahawk by crew chiefs, hands reaching down to pull them to safety. Cortland went up struggling until a crew chief zip-tied her to a seat with the efficiency of someone who'd handled uncooperative passengers before. Colvin went up, Briggs, the 11 rescued hostages. The QRF team leader approached Meredith. "Ma'am, we're loaded. We need to go. Wagner's regrouping for another push." "Rafferty's element," Meredith said. "We don't leave until they're extracted. They're moving to alternate exfil point. Second bird will pick them up there. We need to go now." Meredith hesitated. Every instinct screamed not to leave operators behind. But Rafferty knew the plan. He'd extract with the second wave. She had hostages and critical intelligence to protect. The mission came first. "Go," she said. She grabbed the fast rope, wrapped her legs, slid down into the Seahawk's cargo bay. Before her boots hit the deck, the pilot was pulling pitch, lifting away from the roof as RPG fire streaked past where they'd been seconds before. The warehouse fell away below. Fires burning where vehicles had exploded, bodies scattered. Wagner forces regrouping, but too late. 5 minutes later, Meredith's radio crackled. "Reaper 1, Hawk 1, package is secure." Boone Rafferty's voice, unchanged from the calm he'd maintained throughout the firefight. His element had extracted from their overwatch position, moving through the chaos to a secondary pickup point 300 meters south. The second Seahawk had pulled them out while Wagner forces were still fixated on the burning warehouse. "Copy, Hawk. Casualties?" "Negative, ma'am. Strand took some flying glass. Nothing serious. We're inbound to Baton. See you on deck." Meredith closed her eyes briefly. All 8 operators accounted for. 0 KIA. Against a force twice their size in defended terrain, they'd accomplished the impossible and walked away. Not luck. Preparation. Training. And a plan that exploited enemy doctrine in ways they hadn't anticipated. Through the door gunner's position, Meredith watched Berbera shrink into a constellation of lights against the dark ocean. The mission had succeeded. Hostages rescued, traitor captured, data secured. But the cost would come later. In after-action reports and intelligence debriefs, in the knowledge that American secrets had been partially compromised, in the nightmares where she replayed every decision and wondered if she'd missed something that could have prevented Cortland's betrayal in the first place. Garrett Colvin moved beside her, had to shout over the rotor noise. Hell of an op, Commander. You called it perfectly. She didn't feel perfect. She felt exhausted. But she nodded. Team did the work. I just pointed them in the right direction. Dr. Cortland sat across the cargo bay, zip-tied and silent now, staring at nothing. Her face showed no remorse, only calculation. Already planning her legal defense, probably. Already working the angles. The Seahawk banked toward the ocean, toward the USS Baton waiting beyond the horizon, towards safety and accountability in the complicated aftermath of violence. Meredith closed her eyes for just a moment, let herself feel the relief of survival, of bringing her team through the fire alive. The hard part was over. Now came the harder part, living with what they'd done, understanding what it meant, building something lasting from the chaos and blood. But that was tomorrow's war. Tonight, they'd won. The Seahawk touched down on the Baton's flight deck with the barely controlled impact that Navy pilots called a landing. Meredith pressed her face against the vibrating fuselage, watching Somalia's coastline recede behind them. In the cargo bay, 11 rescued hostages huddled under emergency blankets, eyes hollow with the particular emptiness that came from believing you were going to die and then discovering you weren't. Dr. Evelyn Cortland sat apart from the others, zip-tied wrists resting on her lap, 2 Marine guards flanking her with the dead-eyed vigilance of men who'd been told this woman was worth more than their lives. She stared at nothing, her face a mask that revealed nothing of whatever thoughts churned beneath. Meredith's hands still trembled, not from fear that had burned away in the crucible of close-quarters combat. This was the aftermath, the body's delayed reaction to violence, adrenaline debt coming due with interest. She forced her hands steady. Leadership meant control, even when control was a lie you told your nervous system. Across the bay, Garrett Colvin sat with his left leg extended, field dressing dark with blood where shrapnel from a Wagner grenade had carved through his calf muscle. The team medic, Cormac Sullivan, had already pumped him full of morphine and antibiotics. Colvin's eyes were distant, riding the pharmaceutical edge between pain and numbness. He caught Meredith looking, managed a tight smile, gave her a thumbs up with his non-wounded hand. She nodded back. No words needed. They'd both survived their first operation together. The doubt that had poisoned their first meeting felt like something from another lifetime, though it had been less than a week. The Seahawk banked, approaching the USS Baton. Dawn light fractured across the Indian Ocean, turning water into hammered bronze. Beautiful and indifferent to the violence humans enacted on its shores. Thaddeus Drummond sat near the ramp, cleaning his rifle with the methodical care of a man performing a religious ritual. The weapon had saved his life twice during the warehouse assault. 3 times if you counted the Wagner mercenary who'd almost flanked them before Drummond put 2 rounds through the man's center mass. Lawson Briggs was already typing on a ruggedized tablet, compiling after-action data. His fingers moved with manic energy, the MIT education showing in how he organized chaos into structured information. He was trying to outrun the combat high that would crash into exhaustion in a few hours. Boone Rafferty dozed with his arms crossed, sniper rifle cradled like a lover. His breathing was deep and even. Some operators couldn't sleep after violence. Rafferty had learned decades ago that sleep was a weapon. You took it when offered because you never knew when the next opportunity would come. Eli Strand and Rourke Hayes sat together, speaking in low voices, processing what they'd done. Both young enough that killing still required conscious integration. Eventually, if they survived long enough, the processing would become automatic. The violence would slide into memory without friction. Meredith wasn't sure if that was adaptation or damage. Crew chiefs swarmed the aircraft, guiding hostages toward the medical bay. The Marines escorted Cortland away under heavy guard. Meredith was the last off the helicopter. Her boots hit the deck and her knees nearly buckled. 18 hours since she'd slept. 36 hours since she'd eaten anything substantial. The human machine had limits. She'd exceeded hers. A corpsman approached with a wheelchair. She waved him off. "I'm walking to debrief," she said. Her voice sounded alien to her own ears, rough as broken glass. "Ma'am, you need medical evaluation." After debrief, the corpsman knew better than to argue with a SEAL officer running on fumes and stubbornness. He stepped aside. Meredith walked toward the superstructure. Each step required conscious decision. Left foot, right foot, repeat. The simple mechanics of ambulation felt complex. Behind her, Team 7 followed. 8 operators who'd gone into hell and come back. Bloodied but alive. Their silence spoke volumes. After violence, words were cheap. Survival was the only currency that mattered. The debriefing room was sterile white walls and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look corpse pale. Admiral Duncan Greer was already there, seated at the head of the conference table. Next to him sat CIA officer Deirdre Navarro, looking like she hadn't slept either. Meredith dropped into a chair. Greer pushed a cup of coffee across the table. She wrapped both hands around it, stealing warmth, and drank without tasting. Her body registered the caffeine like a drowning person registers air. "Hostages secure," Greer said. 11 American citizens en route to medical evaluation. 0 friendly KIA. Team 7 sustained minor injuries. Colvin's leg wound is clean, no permanent damage expected. By any metric, this was a successful operation. He paused. Let that acknowledgement settle. However, the situation with Dr. Cortland complicates things. She's been transported to a secure holding area. We need your assessment before formal interrogation begins. Meredith set down the coffee. "Sir, Cortland was not a hostage. She was an active participant in her own extraction. She was standing in the command center, unrestrained, collaborating with Wagner Group Commander Volkov. The laptop in front of her was actively uploading classified data via satellite link. The progress bar showed 81% complete when we breached." Navarro leaned forward. "Did you recover the laptop?" "Yes, Briggs has it in evidence custody. The upload was interrupted when I destroyed the satellite uplink equipment." "Interrupted," Navarro repeated. "So the data transmission was incomplete?" Petty Officer Briggs assessed the upload at 81%. The file architecture suggests they were transmitting complete bioweapons defense research, including Soviet-era agent specifications and countermeasure protocols. Whoever was receiving that data now has most of it. Not all, but enough to reverse engineer the gaps. Greer's expression darkened. "Moscow servers? That was Volkov's claim. We have no way to verify without cyber forensics beyond our operational scope." The Admiral stood, paced to the window overlooking the flight deck. The morning sun painted him in harsh relief, shadows deepening the lines on his face. He looked every one of his 62 years. "Meredith, I need you present for Cortland's interrogation. Standard protocol would exclude operational commanders from intelligence debriefs, but this situation is far from standard. You encountered her at the critical moment. You assessed the scene. I want your observations during questioning." "Sir, I'm not an interrogator." "No, but you're a damn good judge of character. And Cortland needs to understand that the people questioning her aren't just intelligence analysts. They're the operators who risk their lives because of her choices." He turned. "Get 2 hours of sleep, shower, eat something, then report to the brig. That's an order." Meredith knew better than to argue. "Yes, sir." She stood. The room tilted slightly, exhaustion playing tricks on her inner ear. She steadied herself against the table. Garrett Colvin appeared at her elbow. His leg was properly bandaged now, and he moved with the stiff gait of someone navigating serious pain on morphine's cushion. "Commander, you need to sit down before you fall down." "I'm fine." "Ma'am, respectfully, you look like you've been through a meat grinder. Let me help you to your rack." She wanted to refuse. Pride demanded it. But pride was another luxury she couldn't afford. "All right." Colvin guided her toward officer country. They walked in silence through narrow passageways painted in navy gray. Sailors moved aside respectfully. Word had already spread through the ship. Team 7 had gone into Somalia and come back victorious. The whispered legend was already growing. At her cabin door, Colvin paused. "Commander, I need to say something. Can it wait?" "No, ma'am. It's been waiting too long already." He met her eyes. "Day one, when you took command, I challenged you. Publicly, I questioned whether you deserved the position. I implied you were a diversity hire. I was wrong. Not just tactically wrong, morally wrong. You've proven yourself 10 times over. You're not just a good commander, you're the best tactical leader I've served under in 20 years. Meredith studied his face, saw genuine contrition there, and something else, respect earned through fire. "Colvin, you challenged me because you cared about this team. You wanted to ensure we had a leader who could keep us alive. That's not wrong. That's leadership from the ranks. I don't need your apology. I need your continued honesty. If you think I'm making a bad call, tell me. That's more valuable than any apology." He nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am. But for the record, in Berbera, you made every call right. The waterfront approach, the diversionary tactics, shooting that satellite dish mid-firefight to stop the data transfer. Those weren't textbook plays. They were genius. They were calculated risks. We were lucky. Luck is what you call it when skill meets opportunity. You created the opportunity through planning. The skill was always there." He straightened despite the pain it caused. "I'd follow you into hell, Commander. I want you to know that." She felt something shift in her chest. Acceptance. The final barrier crumbling. "Get that leg properly examined, Lieutenant. I need you operational." "Yes, ma'am." He limped away. Meredith entered her cabin and collapsed under the narrow rack without undressing. Sleep took her like a predator taking prey, swift, total, without mercy. She dreamed of warehouse corridors and muzzle flashes, of Evelyn Cortland's cold eyes meeting hers across a laptop streaming secrets, of decisions made in fractions of seconds that would ripple forward for years. She woke 2 hours later to her alarm, body screaming protest. She ignored it. Showered in water that never got quite hot enough, dressed in fresh fatigues, forced down a protein bar that tasted like cardboard but provided calories her depleted system desperately needed. At 1000 hours, she reported to the brig. The interrogation room was designed for psychological pressure. Small, no windows, a single table with chairs on opposite sides, cameras in every corner, the air conditioning set deliberately cold. Evelyn Cortland sat on one side, still zip-tied, looking smaller without the command center and Wagner protection. She'd been allowed to wash, but wore a prisoner's orange jumpsuit. The transformation from respected scientist to accused traitor was complete. Admiral Greer and Deirdre Navarro were already present. They stood against the wall, observers for this particular phase. Meredith took the chair across from Cortland, let the silence stretch. Silence was a weapon. People rushed to fill it, often revealing more than they intended. Cortland broke first. "Commander Kincaid, the hero of the hour, how does it feel to be the diversity success story Navy needed?" Meredith didn't take the bait. Her voice remained neutral. "Dr. Cortland, you're facing federal charges including treason, espionage, and conspiracy to distribute classified information to foreign nationals. The evidence includes your presence in a Wagner Group command center, your laptop actively transmitting classified data, and testimony from multiple witnesses, including Wagner Group Commander Volkov before he died." "Volkov is dead?" For the first time, genuine emotion crossed Cortland's face. Not grief, calculation, reassessing her position. "Lieutenant Colvin shot him twice, center mass. He died instantly." "I see. The preliminary investigations suggest you've been communicating with Wagner Group for at least 2 months. The hostage situation was theater designed to facilitate your extraction. 11 innocent Americans were used as props in your defection. Do you dispute any of this?" Cortland leaned back. "I dispute the characterization. I didn't defect. I accepted an employment opportunity from people who valued my research, people who commit war crimes, people who've been linked to civilian massacres in Syria and Ukraine, people who would weaponize your research to kill innocents, people who didn't cut my funding because of political cowardice. Cortland's voice gained edge. I gave 20 years to programs designed to defend against bioterrorism. I developed countermeasures to Soviet weaponized anthrax, nerve agents, hemorrhagic fever viruses. My work could have saved thousands of lives in a bioterror scenario. Instead, politicians decided the optics were bad. Defense research sounds too much like offense research. Can't have that in the headlines. She leaned forward. Do you know what it's like, Commander? To dedicate your life to something and watch it destroyed because people don't have the courage to fund necessary but uncomfortable work. Wagner Group offered me $15 million and guaranteed research continuation. Was I supposed to refuse because of abstract moral concerns about who might eventually benefit? Meredith kept her expression neutral. You're rationalizing treason. I'm explaining context. There's a difference. No, there isn't. Meredith's voice hardened. You made a choice to collaborate with hostile actors. That choice put American lives at risk. It forced my team into a combat situation where any one of them could have died. Garrett Colvin took shrapnel because you decided your research was more important than your country. How do you justify that? I justify it by recognizing that patriotism is a marketing tool governments use to exploit people like you. Cortland met her eyes. You risk your life for a system that will discard you the moment you're no longer useful. I chose differently. I chose self-interest. That makes me a realist, not a traitor. The room was silent except for the hum of air conditioning. Deirdre Navarro spoke from the wall. Dr. Cortland, realism would have recognized that Wagner Group wouldn't let you simply walk away with their payment. You're a loose end. They would have eliminated you within 6 months, probably staged it as an accident. You weren't entering a partnership. You were volunteering to be a temporary asset followed by a convenient corpse. Cortland's confidence flickered. They guaranteed nothing, Navarro interrupted. We've intercepted communications discussing exactly this scenario. Wagner's policy with defectors is consistent. Extract maximum value, then eliminate liability. You would have been dead by Christmas. You're lying. I'm a CIA officer specializing in counterintelligence operations against Russian asymmetric warfare units. I've studied Wagner Group for 8 years. I've interviewed 3 previous defectors they attempted to recruit, all of whom are alive because they refused the offer. I'm not lying. I'm telling you what you would have learned too late. Cortland's hands trembled, the first crack in her facade. Meredith leaned forward. Doctor, the data you were transmitting, 81% complete before I terminated the upload. How much of that 81% is usable? Why does that matter? It's already gone. Answer the question. Cortland hesitated. Then, the file structure was modular, divided into sections covering different agent types. Anthrax protocols, smallpox variants, nerve agent countermeasures. Each module is independently functional. At 81%, they have approximately 7 of 9 complete modules, enough for substantial reverse engineering, which means Moscow now has most of our bioweapons defense research. Presumably, if Volkov wasn't lying about the receiving servers. Admiral Greer stepped forward. His voice carried decades of watching good people make catastrophic decisions. Dr. Cortland, I was the captain who recommended cutting your program's funding 15 years ago. I sat on the oversight committee. I read your research proposals. I understood the potential value. And I still voted to defund because I believed the ethical risks outweighed the defensive benefits. That decision haunted me for years, wondering if I'd made the wrong call. He placed both hands on the table, leaning close. Today, I know I made the right call, because your response to professional disappointment was to sell American secrets to hostile foreign actors. That vindicated every concern we had about your judgment. You just proved that cutting your funding wasn't about your research capabilities. It was about your character. Cortland's face flushed. You sanctimonious bastard. You destroyed my life's work and now you justify it by claiming prescience? You had no idea I would. You're right. I didn't know. But I suspected, because the same brilliant obsession that made you a talented researcher also made you dangerous. Single-minded devotion to research without ethical boundaries is how we got Unit 731, how we got Tuskegee, how we got every scientific atrocity committed in the name of advancing knowledge. Greer straightened. Here's what happens now. You have one opportunity to cooperate fully. Provide decryption keys. Detail every contact with Wagner Group. Identify the receiving servers and any other parties involved. In exchange, the Department of Justice will consider reducing your charges from treason to espionage. Life imprisonment instead of execution. And if I refuse? Then you face trial, and the evidence will bury you. Laptop, testimony, communications intercepts. You'll be convicted, and you'll die in a federal facility. The only question is whether you provide some value before that happens. Cortland stared at her zip-tied hands. Minutes stretched. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost its defiant edge. I need a lawyer before I answer. That's your right. This conversation is concluded. Greer nodded to the Marine Guards. Return Dr. Cortland to her cell. Ensure she has access to military legal counsel. The guards escorted her out. The door closed with mechanical finality. Navarro turned to Meredith. Commander, your instinct to destroy the satellite uplink was critical. If that upload had completed, we'd be facing a significantly worse national security situation. The after-action report will reflect that your tactical decision prevented complete data compromise. Meredith nodded numbly. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the interrogation was fading, leaving only exhaustion in its wake. 3 days later, Meredith received word through Admiral Greer. Dr. Cortland had agreed to cooperate fully in exchange for the reduced charges. The decryption keys had been provided. NSA cyber teams were already working to identify and mitigate the compromised data modules. The damage assessment was sobering. 7 of 9 bioweapons defense protocols had been transmitted to Moscow servers before Meredith destroyed the uplink. Russian intelligence now possessed substantial information about American countermeasures to weaponized anthrax, nerve agents, and hemorrhagic fever viruses. The gap could be closed through new research, but it would take years and billions of dollars. 7 protocols compromised because one brilliant scientist had chosen resentment over loyalty. Meredith wondered if Cortland understood yet, that Wagner would have killed her within months, that the $15 million would have been worthless in a shallow grave outside St. Petersburg, that her choice hadn't been between patriotism and self-interest, but between life and death. Probably not. People rarely saw their own blind spots clearly. The sentencing wouldn't happen for months. Federal trials moved with geological slowness, but the outcome was certain. Life imprisonment at a federal facility, probably ADX Florence, where the worst traitors went to die slowly in solitary confinement. Meredith felt no satisfaction in that knowledge, only the cold awareness that one person's choices had cascaded into consequences affecting millions. That was the nature of betrayal at this level. The damage spread like ripples in dark water, touching shores you couldn't see from where you stood. She filed the report and moved on. There was other work to do. Greer studied her. You handled that well, kept pressure on without losing composure. Cortland's psychological profile suggests she responds to strength. You showed her strength. Sir, I just let her know the consequences of her choices. That's not interrogation, that's accountability. Sometimes they're the same thing. He gestured toward the door. Come on, you've been awake too long. Get a real meal. Rest. We'll continue debriefing tomorrow after everyone's had time to process. They walked through the ship's passageways. Sailors snapped salutes as Greer passed. The admiral returned each one with the automatic precision of decades of military service. "Meredith, I owe you honesty," he said quietly. "I sent you into that operation with incomplete intelligence deliberately. I knew Cortland was likely a defector. I didn't tell you because I needed to see if you could adapt to changing circumstances. Real command means operating with imperfect information. I had to know you could handle it." She'd suspected as much. Still, hearing it confirmed felt like a betrayal. "Sir, that decision put my team at risk." Greer stopped walking, turned to face her fully. His expression was raw in a way she'd never seen before. "You want the truth? Some days I don't live with it well at all. I have a file in my desk at home, photographs of every operator who died under my command over 40 years. 43 faces. I know their names, their families, how they died. I look at that file once a year on my commissioning anniversary." He paused. When he spoke again, his voice carried decades of burden. "Cortland's betrayal? That's on me too. I cut her funding 15 years ago. Made the right call for the wrong reasons. I was covering for political masters who didn't want bad press. She responded by becoming a traitor. That's in my file too. Not a photograph, but another name. Another consequence of my decisions." "Sir, you can't blame yourself for her choices." "Can't I?" His eyes were hard. "Leadership means accepting that your decisions create ripples you'll never fully see. I could have handled Cortland differently, found funding through black budgets, kept her engaged instead of cutting her loose. Maybe she wouldn't have turned. Maybe she would have anyway. I'll never know. That uncertainty is the price." He started walking again. Meredith followed. "The moment you stop feeling that burden is the moment you become dangerous," Greer continued. "Commanders who don't feel the cost make reckless decisions. The guilt keeps you honest, keeps you careful, makes you remember that every order you give might be the last thing someone hears before they die." They reached the wardroom. Greer stopped at the entrance. "You asked how I live with it. The answer is poorly, but necessarily. And now you'll learn to live with it too, because that's what command means, making impossible choices and carrying the dead with you." He met her eyes. "Welcome to the burden, Commander Kincaid. It never gets lighter. You just get stronger at carrying it." He departed before she could respond. Meredith loaded a tray with food she barely tasted and found a corner table. She ate mechanically, fueling the machine. Across the wardroom, Team 7 occupied a table together. Colvin sat with his wounded leg elevated, animated conversation flowing around him. Boone Rafferty gestured with his fork, doubtless recounting some aspect of the operation with the laconic precision of a natural storyteller. Thaddeus Drummond laughed at something Lawson Briggs said. Cormac Sullivan checked his phone, probably messaging family. They looked like what they were, men who'd survived something together. The particular bond that formed between operators who'd seen each other at their worst and their best. Meredith watched them and felt something she hadn't expected. Pride. Not in herself, but in them. They'd trusted her when trust was difficult, followed her when following was dangerous, performed flawlessly under conditions that would break lesser men. Garrett Colvin caught her looking, raised his water glass in silent toast. She returned the gesture. No words needed. They'd proven themselves to each other. The rest was just details. 2 weeks later, Naval Amphibious Base Coronado shimmered under late September sun. The ceremony was closed to media. The Somalia operation remained classified. Details compartmented at levels requiring security clearances most civilians would never possess. But the SEAL community turned out in force. Hundreds of operators, past and present, filling the courtyard at the Team 7 compound. Meredith stood at attention in dress whites, the fabric crisp enough to cut glass. Beside her, Team 7 formed a perfect line. Even Colvin, his legs still healing, stood without assistance. Pride demanded it. Admiral Greer presided. Captain Vance Rayburn stood next to him. The old SEAL's face carved from granite, but something like approval in his eyes. Team 7 conducted operations in denied territory under extreme conditions, Greer announced, his voice carrying across the assembly. They faced numerically superior enemy forces in fortified positions. Through superior tactics, exceptional courage, and selfless dedication to mission accomplishment, they successfully rescued 11 American hostages and secured critical national security objectives. He moved down the line, pinning medals with the precision of ritual. Meredith received the Navy Cross. The citation was classified, but the medal spoke for itself. The second highest decoration for valor, awarded only for extraordinary heroism in combat. Garrett Colvin and Boone Rafferty each received Silver Stars. The remaining team members were awarded Bronze Stars with Valor devices. After the ceremony, families swarmed the courtyard. Children ran to fathers. Wives embraced husbands. The operators who'd been warriors hours ago transformed into family men, the dichotomy jarring and beautiful. Meredith stood apart, watching. She had no family present. Her father had died 3 years ago, massive heart attack, gone before the ambulance arrived. Her mother 2 decades before that, no siblings, no spouse. The Navy was her family. The teams were her tribe. Captain Rayburn approached. The old operator studied her with eyes that had witnessed 40 years of warfare. Commander Kincaid, hell of a job in Berbera. I'll admit, when Greer recommended you for Team 7, I had doubts. Reeves was a legend. Following him seemed impossible. He extended his hand. I was wrong. You're not following Reeves. You're forging your own path. The teams are better for having you. She shook his hand. Thank you, sir. That means more than the medal. Keep doing what you're doing. Break every barrier they put in front of you. Make them eat their doubt. He smiled slightly. And for what it's worth, there are 3 female candidates in BUD/S right now. They're struggling like everyone struggles, but they're still there. You're the proof it's possible. Don't underestimate the power of that. He walked away before she could respond. Garrett Colvin limped over, his young daughter riding his shoulders. She was maybe 5 years old, blonde braids and gap-toothed smile. Commander, meet Riley. Riley, this is Commander Kincaid. She's the reason Daddy came home. Riley studied Meredith with the solemn assessment children sometimes display. You're a soldier? Sailor, technically, but close enough. Girls can be sailors? Girls can be anything they want. They just have to work hard and never quit. Riley considered this. Then, okay, I want to be an astronaut. Colvin laughed. Astronaut, huh? Last week it was veterinarian. I can be both. Yes, you can, baby girl. He looked at Meredith. Commander, my family's having dinner tonight at our place. Nothing fancy. Burgers and beer. You'd be welcome. The invitation surprised her. Operators maintained careful boundaries between professional and personal lives. Being invited to a family dinner was significant. I wouldn't want to intrude. You wouldn't be intruding. You'd be honoring us. His expression was serious. You led us into hell and brought us home. That means you're family. Family has dinner together. She hesitated then. What time? 1800. I'll text you the address. They departed. Meredith stood in the emptying courtyard, watching families disperse. The Navy Cross felt heavy on her chest. Not the physical mass, that was negligible. The symbolic burden. The representation of decisions made under fire. Of lives preserved through judgment and skill and luck. Admiral Greer appeared at her elbow. Quite a day. Yes, sir. I have a proposition. Team 3 needs a new commander. Their current CO is rotating stateside. The position is yours if you want it. She turned. Sir, I just established credibility with Team 7. Starting over seems counterproductive or an opportunity. Greer's eyes held challenge. Meredith, you succeeded here, proved yourself beyond doubt. But the Navy needs you to replicate that success elsewhere. Train the next generation. Transform the culture one team at a time. Legacy isn't about commanding one unit perfectly. It's about changing the institution. She looked across the courtyard where Team 7's families gathered, thought about Riley Colvin wanting to be an astronaut, about the three women struggling through BUD/S, about every future female operator who would face the same doubt she'd faced. "When do I start, sir?" Greer smiled. 2 months. Enough time to transition Team 7 properly. Enough time to enjoy your victory. He paused. "And Meredith, I'm proud of you. Not because you proved the doubters wrong, because you proved yourself right." 6 months later, March 2025, the Kill House at Coronado, refurbished and updated, hosted a new generation of SEAL candidates. The class included 4 women, 3 from BUD/S, 1 lateral transfer from another special operations unit. Commander Meredith Kincaid stood before them in fatigues worn soft from use, her Navy Cross ribbon visible above her left pocket. "Close quarters battle is about more than shooting straight," she began. "It's about reading terrain, understanding enemy behavior, making split-second decisions when hesitation means death. Today we're running case studies from actual operations, names and locations classified, but the lessons are universal." She activated the projection system. Drone footage appeared. A warehouse complex, patrol patterns, defensive positions. This was a hostage rescue in denied territory. Numerically superior enemy force in fortified positions. Standard assault doctrine said, "Wait for reinforcements." We didn't wait. We analyzed the enemy defensive posture and identified their weak point. They were professionals using professional tactics, which made them predictable. One of the female candidates raised her hand. "Ma'am, how did you convince your team to accept a non-standard approach?" Meredith smiled slightly. "I didn't convince them with words. I convinced them with analysis. I showed them exactly why the unconventional approach would work and what risks we were accepting. Then I let them make their own assessment. Trust isn't demanded, it's earned through competence." She advanced the footage, showing the waterfront approach. "We infiltrated from the direction enemy doctrine said was suicide. Exposed, well lit, tactically disadvantageous, which was exactly why it worked. We thought differently than they expected. That cognitive advantage was worth more than superior firepower." Another candidate. "What if the team had disagreed with your plan?" "Then I would have listened. If their objections were valid, we'd have modified the approach." Leadership isn't about forcing your vision on others. It's about synthesizing the best ideas from everyone and making the final call. My team's experience was invaluable. I'd have been a fool to ignore it. She ran through the tactical breakdown, the diversions, the breach, the adaptation when intelligence proved incomplete, the split-second decision to shoot the satellite dish instead of the hostile with the weapon. Adaptability matters more than planning. No plan survives contact with reality. Your ability to think and adjust in real time determines whether you complete the mission or become a casualty. After the briefing, one of the female candidates approached, young, maybe 24, with the lean intensity of someone fighting to prove themselves every day. "Ma'am, can I ask something personal?" "Go ahead. How did you handle the doubt? The men who didn't think you belonged?" Meredith considered the question, thought about Garrett Colvin's challenge on day 1, about Admiral Greer's brutal tests, about every moment of doubt she'd faced over 15 years. "I stopped trying to change their minds with arguments. I changed their minds with performance. Competence is the only language that matters. You can't convince someone you're capable through words. You prove it through actions. And once you've proven it, the doubt becomes irrelevant." What if they never accept you? Then they never accept you. But that's their problem, not yours. Your job is to be so undeniably competent that their acceptance becomes unnecessary. She paused. "Though I'll tell you something I learned. Most of the men who doubted me weren't malicious. They were protective of their teams. They wanted to ensure their brothers would come home alive. Once they saw I could help keep them alive, the doubt vanished. It wasn't about me being female. It was about me being unproven. I proved myself. The rest took care of itself. The candidate nodded slowly. Thank you, ma'am. Don't thank me. Go prove yourself. Then come back and teach the next generation. As the candidate walked away, Meredith thought about Captain Rayburn's words at the ceremony. 3 female candidates in BUD/S. Still there. Still fighting. One of them had quit 2 weeks ago. Stress fractures in both legs. Pushed too far too fast trying to match the physical output of men who had 40 pounds more muscle mass. The Navy was still learning how to train women for this pipeline. Still making mistakes. But 2 remained. One was currently in Hell Week, hallucinating from exhaustion and hypothermia, but refusing to ring the bell. The other had already made it through, was in dive phase, performing at the top of her class. They would make it, or they wouldn't. Meredith couldn't carry them through, but she could be the proof that the destination was reachable. Sometimes that was enough. The knowledge that someone had walked the path before you, that the impossible was merely improbable. She turned back to the class. All right, let's run through the warehouse breach one more time. I want to talk about explosive placement and timing. That evening, Meredith walked the beach at Coronado. The Pacific Ocean stretched to infinity, waves rolling in with the patience of geological time. The sun set behind her, painting the eastern sky in shades of purple and gold. Her phone buzzed. Text from Garrett Colvin. Dinner at my place next week? Team 7 reunion. You better be there. She smiled and typed back. Wouldn't miss it. Another text, this one from Admiral Greer. Team 3 excited to meet their new CO. You ready? Her response. Always. A third notification appeared. Email this time from Admiral Greer's office. Subject line. Cortland's sentencing. She opened it. The message was brief. Dr. Evelyn Cortland had been sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole at ADX Florence. The judge had noted the unprecedented damage to national security and rejected all appeals for leniency. Cortland would spend the rest of her life in a 7 by 12-foot concrete cell, 23 hours a day in solitary confinement. Meredith felt no satisfaction, only the cold awareness that one brilliant mind had chosen betrayal and would now rot in a cage for decades until death came as mercy. She deleted the email and pocketed her phone. She pocketed the phone and continued walking. The sand was cool beneath her boots. Somewhere behind her, the SEAL compound continued its eternal work, training operators, planning missions, preparing for wars that would come whether anyone wanted them or not. She thought about her father, Montana rancher turned Army Ranger. He taught her to shoot at age 7 with a rifle taller than she was, told her stories about his time in the service that most Rangers never shared with their children. Never once suggested she couldn't do anything because of her gender. He died before seeing her receive the Navy Cross. Heart attack in the middle of feeding cattle, gone before he hit the ground. But she hoped he'd known, hoped he'd seen glimpses of what she was building on the foundation he'd provided. The ocean whispered against the shore, eternal, indifferent, beautiful in its refusal to judge human choices. Meredith turned back toward the compound where lights were beginning to glow against the gathering dusk. Inside those buildings, operators were preparing for wars that hadn't started yet, training for missions they couldn't predict, building the readiness that meant survival when the call came. She'd be part of that work, leading Team 3, training new operators, breaking barriers one mission at a time until the barriers themselves became irrelevant. Not for recognition, not for medals, but because the work mattered. Because every operator she trained to think unconventionally might be the one who survived an impossible situation. Because proving competence transcended gender meant the next generation wouldn't have to fight the same battles she'd fought. That was legacy. Not what you accomplished personally, but what you built that outlasted you. She walked back toward the compound, boots leaving temporary impressions in sand that the tide would erase by morning. Some things were permanent, others were fleeting. The trick was knowing which mattered and which didn't. Behind her, the Pacific Ocean rolled on, carrying ships and secrets and the burden of endless warfare. Ahead, the SEAL compound waited with its eternal promise. Another mission, another test, another chance to prove that impossible was just a word that quit too early. Meredith Kincaid walked toward that promise, carrying her dead and her living both, ready for whatever came next.